By the age of 5, he claims he was already raising himself. By the time he graduated high school, he had earned a full-ride scholarship to one of the most prestigious universities in the country and was winning national awards for his journalism. But now Skip Bayless is being called the most hated man in sports, less than 15 years after he changed the industry forever. So how did he get here? And what was Skip's secret to going from the child of 2 parents who said they never wanted him to becoming one of the most iconic figures in sports media history? Because there was a specific strategy he used to achieve this meteoric rise, and it's the same thing that's now responsible for his downfall. Well, we're about to find out, and by the end of this video, I'll share the one way I think Skip can salvage his career, because it is still possible. He just won't like hearing it. John Edward Bayless II was born in Oklahoma City in 1951 to Levita and John Sr. Almost immediately, his dad started calling him Skip, which was short for Skipper, and was also the nickname of his mom Levita. In fact, Skip recalls never once hearing his parents call him by his birth name John, which bothered him so much that by the time he was 20, he legally changed his name to Skip. Now, his mom earned this nickname because she was the head of the Bayless household, and as the oldest of his 3 siblings, young Skip took after her in many ways, and not all of them good. See, Skip's parents owned a barbecue restaurant called the Hickory House in OKC, where he began working at the age of 4. It was here that he began to describe his mom as a vain, self-absorbed woman who told him many times to his face that she never wanted to be a mother. Meanwhile, his father was an abusive alcoholic who rarely said more than a few words per week to his kids. This upbringing meant Skip was pretty much on his own starting at age 5, which made him resent almost everything about his childhood, to the point that in his 20s, he vowed to never have kids of his own for fear of turning into either one of his parents. Now, aside from his family life, Skip's childhood can be described as fairly typical. He fell in love with sports at an early age, particularly basketball and baseball, and while he was better at baseball, he says that basketball became his first love. However, he stopped growing in high school at 5'11", which meant that he had to rely on his ferocious competitiveness to make his high school team. The same competitiveness that often landed him in fights at a young age. And when he reflects on it, Skip blames his dad for giving him, as he describes, a type A+ personality, since he grew up always thinking that he had to prove his dad wrong. That's because aside from drinking, his dad's favorite hobby was being disappointed in everything Skip did. To this day, Skip can't recall one time either of his parents ever asked how he was doing in sports or school, or even told him that they loved him. This stoked a fire in him at a young age that can actually still explain some of his actions today. But early on, it simply meant that Skip became solely focused on one goal, leaving Oklahoma City and going to college. Now, at this point, no one in his family had more than a high school education, and Skip thought that his ticket out of that cycle would be through basketball. But by his senior year, he was only averaging 1.4 points per game. Luckily, he had a hidden talent to fall back on. He just didn't realize it yet. As Skip tells the story, one day during his junior year, his English teacher asked him to stay after class. He describes how she didn't ask, but rather ordered that he join the journalism club because of his promising writing skills. Skip objected, but to no avail, and that year he began covering the very same teams he was playing on. This led him to earn a sports writing scholarship that allowed him to attend Vanderbilt University on a full ride. Here he majored in English and history, only calling home a few times per year. He was happy to have escaped Oklahoma City, and by 1974, he graduated cum laude and took a job working at the Miami Herald. Now, early in Skip's career, he became well known for his investigative work as a sports columnist who never shied away from covering potentially touchy stories. For instance, in 1976, when he took a job at the Los Angeles Times at just 25 years old, he made a splash when he published a piece on the Dodgers clubhouse resentment of their golden boy first baseman Steve Garvey and his celebrity wife Cindy. Another time he ruffled feathers when he reported that LA Rams owner Carol Rosenblum was actually the one making the behind-the-scenes decisions to start different quarterbacks every week. Skip's stories were part sport, part reality TV, but they were always well-sourced, expertly written, and extremely in-depth, often 3,000 to 4,000 words long. He even won his first national awards for outstanding writing in 1977 at age 26. The same year, he became one of the youngest sports writers to have a national column at the Dallas Morning News and later the Dallas Times-Herald. Here, he would go on to be voted Texas Sports Writer of the Year 3 times between 1979 and 1986. But then in 1989, Skip would publish a story that would set his career on a crash course no one could have predicted. Now, Dallas is known for its extremely hot summer heat, but you don't have to live in the South to know that the worst feeling is being hot and sticky down there. Luckily, I found the next best thing to just shoving a fan down your pants, and they're called Chill Boys. Chill Boys is owned and operated by two guys right here in Minnesota, and over the past decade, they've become obsessed with finding the most comfortable material to make underwear out of that also keeps your boys free and dry. This might be TMI, but I actually just wore their super soft bamboo boxer briefs to a baseball game when it was 90 degrees out, and normally I would completely dread standing up because of all the swass you get from sitting down too long in the summer. But these things have been expertly designed with a no-sweat vent in the lower back area that kept me feeling cool and dry the whole time, all while staying odor-free thanks to their advanced antimicrobial fiber. And don't just take my word for it, because every single one of their designs has hundreds, if not thousands, of 5-star reviews. So ditch that old, worn-out cotton underwear that I know has been sitting in your drawer for the last 5 years, and get yourself something that you actually look forward to wearing. And when you use my code TW15 at chillboys.com, you'll get 15% off your first purchase. Just click the first link in the description or go to chillboys.com and use code TW15 for 15% off your entire first order. Now, Skip's rise to fame in Dallas coincided quite well with the Cowboys' rise in popularity. And in 1989 and 1993, he wrote his first 2 books chronicling the rise of the team. Both pieces featured the exact kind of work Skip had become known for. They were well-sourced and in-depth, but contained the kind of salacious drama that helped them fly off the shelves. That's when Skip took things one step further and published his third and final book in 1996, titled Hellbent: The Crazy Truth About the Winter-Rouse Dallas Cowboys After Their Third Super Bowl Win in 4 years. But this last book contained a section that drew major scrutiny at the time and is something that still follows Skip around to this day. See, Skip learned that controversy and drama sold. And nowhere was there more drama with this Cowboys team than between head coach Barry Switzer and star quarterback Troy Aikman. In the book, Skip reported on speculation by Switzer and people close to him in the organization that Troy Aikman was gay. And while Skip himself never claimed to believe it, Skip didn't care, because he had just been proven right. Controversy sold. The book was a hit, and he was even able to start faxing his column directly to readers for $99 a year when his employer, the Dallas Times-Herald, went out of business. But what really solidified Skip's identity as a contrarian was when a relatively new 24/7 sports network came calling. Now, the same year Skip published his first book, he also joined ESPN as a panelist on their show, The Sports Reporters. By then, he was already well known for being a polarizing figure locally, but now he was given the platform to talk about more than just the Dallas Cowboys, and he took it. By the 2000s, Skip had made the leap from the newspaper to completely focus on TV, spending the next few years guest starring on different ESPN shows, filling in for Jim Rome, and even commentating events for the Golf Channel. In 2004, Skip was finally hired full-time by ESPN to team up with Paige in a daily segment called First and 10. The idea was that the two reporters would be featured during ESPN2's new morning show, Cold Pizza, and asked to debate a few topics every day in between news and highlight segments. But that version of the show wouldn't last long for 2 reasons, both of which have been blamed on Skip. The first is because, according to his co-host Paige, Skip was tiring to work with. He had always been a loner, even during his days in Dallas, but his obsession with his job was beyond what anyone else was used to. And that's not just coming from me.
17 years ago, I told my wife on our first date in New York City, I told her that night, first date, first 15 minutes, because I had a feeling. I said, hey, if this goes anywhere, just understand, you're always gonna be number 2 to my career, because it's my life. It's my passion. It's my reason for being. It's all, in the end, I really care about is my career, because it's not work. It's not a job. It's me. It's who I am.
And while this dedication might have served Skip well at his previous jobs, taking a light-hearted TV debate segment too seriously had become his specialty, to the point that it resulted in a physical altercation with his co-host Paige.
I got so tired of working with him, and it was interesting because he genuinely believes in what he says. And one morning, Jay Crawford, who was one of the hosts of the show, said, okay, guys, we have this funny question in the program. Golf Magazine says that golfers, and you play golf, golfers would give up sex for an entire year if they could improve their handicap by 4 strokes. And they said to Skip, would you give up sex for, I don't know that I've ever told this story, would you give up sex for a year to improve your golf game? And he said, I have a great golf game. He said, I've had more sex than anybody in this room combined. There's 10 people in the room. You've had more sex than everybody combined. And there wasn't any laughter or anything. He wasn't being funny. He was being serious. And the producer of the show at the time said, that's not the answer we want you to give on the air. Give something else. So we go on the air. We're live. That show was live in the morning for 2 hours. It was like the Today Show, of sports version of the Today Show. And so we're toward the end of the show, and they said, okay, what do you got a funny story here? Golf magazine. Would you give up sex for a year? And I told them the same story. I said, of course I would. Yes. In fact, I'll give up sex for 2 years if I could improve it by 6 strokes in handicap. And so Jay turned to Skip and said, would you give up sex for a year if you could improve your golf game? And he said, I've had more sex than Woody's ever even thought about. I got up, we were at a sort of a
This is on live TV, right, Woody?
Yeah. So I got up and I went over and I started choking him. That's not a good thing for you, but I grabbed him by the throat, and honestly, he worked out every day. He was in a lot better shape than me. I did a lot of drinking in New York. That argument got into a fight that ended up on the floor. You can look at it, find it on YouTube. And close by was a door to 8th and 34th Street in New York City. And we kind of opened the door and just went outside, and we could hear the producer director, and they said, let it go, let it go. And so we're like tumbling into the street.
Now, other people familiar with this incident say that Woody is playing it up a little bit, but the tension was certainly real. And whether or not it's the reason cold pizza only lasted 3 years, what you can't refute is that Skip was the architect behind what came next. In 2011, almost 4 years after the cancellation of Cold Pizza, a show called First Take was launched to take its place. However, this show wouldn't have any of the segments or highlights that normally came with an ESPN morning show. Instead, it would be built solely around the most popular part of the program it was replacing, the debates. And at the center of it would be ESPN's most polarizing personality, Skip Bayless. Immediately, the show was a success, seeing a 58% increase in ratings in just the first 3 months. And after cycling through different debate partners for 6 months, the network decided to make another emerging star Skip's permanent co-host, a local NBA reporter from Philadelphia named Stephen A. Smith. This decision launched the show to an entirely new level, with First Take regularly averaging close to 500,000 viewers per episode, making it the most viewed original program on the entire network. But just like what happened before, Skip's overly serious attitude mixed with his knack for leaning into controversy created a rift that proved too much for him to come back from. Now, it's hard to pinpoint the exact moment that Skip Bayless jumped the shark, but one example could be his tireless coverage of Tim Tebow. From claiming that Tebow was a better prospect than Andrew Luck in 2012, to saying that he would take him over Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers with the game on the line, Skip found a way to shoehorn Tebow into almost every sports debate, even long after he was done playing football. And evidently, this shtick grew old quickly with the bosses at ESPN.
They had remembered that Skip Bayless lived off of talking about Tim Tebow every day before I arrived. They had accused Skip Bayless, meaning the public, of being a caricature of himself. And even though Skip was incredibly proud of his Tim Tebow coverage, the bosses weren't necessarily enamored with it. Skip Bayless was incredibly proud of his coverage of Tim Tebow. The bosses felt otherwise.
But Stephen A. and the bosses at ESPN weren't the only ones to notice that the once esteemed journalist had become a cartoonish version of himself. In fact, I think one Dallas resident in particular, and someone who knew Skip's work before he went into TV, put it best.
Right, you guys like to talk in complete generalities where no one can question you, right? You don't ever use facts, you don't ever use substance, you don't ever
use facts.
No.
That's all I use on this show.
What, excruciating pressure, undeniable this, it's just all generalities.
But none of this fazed Skip, because he was doing the one thing he was best at, stirring the pot. And now he was doing it on the biggest network with the biggest show in the country. And he was about to receive a call that would validate all the work he had been doing for the past 40 years. See, in 2015, the network Fox was trying to build out its sports department in a way that could finally rival ESPN. To do this, they eyed some of their competitors' best talent, which included a 4-year, $20 million deal with Skip to create a similar debate-style show to challenge the success of First Take. And if Skip wasn't already stuck in his ways before this big payday, he definitely was now. And honestly, you can't blame him. He was now making more money than he probably ever had in his career to do the one thing that he had become most famous for, debating sports on TV. In 2016, FS1's Undisputed premiered with former NFL tight end Shannon Sharpe sitting across from Skip. But this just proved to be the beginning of the end. In its first full year on the air, the show barely averaged more than 120,000 viewers, 4 times less what First Take was pulling. But Fox doubled down on the format, re-signing Skip to another 4-year, $32 million deal in March of 2021. However, the slide continued, and after a public fallout between Skip and Shannon in 2023 sent Shannon packing for ESPN, Undisputed has failed to average over 100,000 viewers since. So it's no surprise that when Skip's contract was up for an extension this year, the network decided they were okay with letting him walk. But that doesn't mean Skip is done, because even though it may look like the 72-year-old's best days are behind him, just listen to him talk about retirement a few years ago.
I don't even want to hear the word retirement because I associate it with death. It's the first step toward death is retirement to me.
That doesn't sound like a guy who's ready to pack it up. So what should he do? His own podcast isn't all that successful, and ESPN doesn't seem to want him back. Well, I have 2 predictions. One is what I think he should do, and the other is what I think he will do. Let's start with what he should do. At this point, Skip has likely earned over $100 million in his career, he has redefined sports media for better or for worse, and he's become a household name. I think even he'd admit that's far more than he could have ever hoped to accomplish. But at the same time, I think it's clear that he's not ready to just sit on the beach until he dies. So why not go back to his roots and write another book on the Dallas Cowboys or any other number of teams? His name recognition alone would make whatever he writes an instant bestseller. Not to mention that writing is arguably what he's best at. This way he could still be involved in sports, but it could happen on his own terms, without the needs for all the politics of a big network. And this way he can ride into the sunset as a pioneer in sports media while still being remembered for his true talents. But if I were to put money on it, that's not what's going to happen. Instead, I could see some second-rate media network or even a local radio station offer him a cushy yet discounted salary to spit takes on their channels until he can't walk anymore. This would certainly be the saddest option. It would be like watching a washed-up rock star play at a county fair. It's sad and demoralizing, and it's probably where he'll end up. Because at the end of the day, Skip has always gotten attention for his sensationalized takes and ideas, not any connection he's built with a real audience. And when he wasn't the only one debating sports on TV anymore, his audience realized there were better places to go for sports content, leaving him on the outside looking in on an entire industry he's responsible for helping create. If you enjoyed this deep dive, consider subscribing. I do 2 of these sports business profiles every month. Sometimes they're interviews and sometimes they're just profiles like this one. And if you want to give suggestions for who I should cover next, make sure to leave those in the comments. I'll see you guys in 2 weeks.